Welcome to Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, the local minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ, located at 7800 Central Avenue in Landover, Maryland. Throughout the week, we focused on relationships, and we've talked about topics ranging from just the mere definition of relationships, how to nurture relationships, how to keep them wholesome. And then we discussed, why do relationships fail? Well, today I'd like for us to do our last lesson of the week, focused on another topic that is, I think, very, very necessary when it comes to relationships. And that is, if a relationship fails, how do you heal the fractures of that failed relationship? So now, what do you do? It doesn't always mean that the relationship that has failed can be healed, but your life needs healing, and you need to be able, in a healthy way, to move forward with life. So let's talk today about, how do you heal from a fractured relationship? And I'd like to start by looking at a biblical principle of diagnosing the source of the fracture. If we don't properly diagnose what happened in the relationship, why it failed, then it is probably more probable than not that we will venture into a new relationship only to have it potentially fail as well. So in the book of James, chapter 4, verse number 1, James writes, "What is causing the quarrels and the fights among you?" That's the question. He doesn't address the symptoms. Well, we don't speak to each other. We don't go out together. He says, what is causing the quarrels and what's causing the fights among you? And he says, now here's my diagnosis. Don't they come from the evil desires at war within the relationship? Somebody, if there's a two-party relationship and there's constant relational problems, at least one person in that relationship is operating from an intent base that is likely unhealthy. The majority of relationship healing is spent reviewing the hurt experienced by the fractured relationship, rather than tracing the relationship and the patterns within the fracture. Let me explain it this way. What unhealthy traits do you identify in yourself? See, trace the relationship patterns. What unhealthy traits, not just in the specific relationship now that is in danger, but what have been the unhealthy relational traits that you are willing to identify historically within yourself, historically within your family? Every relationship, or almost every relationship, what unhealthy commonality have almost without fail come up in your personal interactions with people? And then secondly, what unhealthy traits do you identify in the other individual? Well, I understand each person must examine himself or herself, but through your observation of the individual, of from your observation of the individual's extended family, what unhealthy traits do you identify within the other individual? Many times, if we're paying attention, number one, to ourselves, and if we're paying attention to the individual or individuals we are in a relationship with, we're going to pick up on some unhealthy traits that are indicators of why the present relationship is fractured. Be open in terms of how to move beyond the relational fracture. Be open to listening instead of speaking. Again, in the book of James, chapter 1, verse number 19, it's a very familiar text, but listen at what James says. Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. He's addressing relationships, and his recommendation for healing, mending, or doing better with a new relationship is this must be understood up front. You must all be. Do you see that? You must all be, everyone within a relationship, all be. It's a mandate. Everyone in the relationship is mandated, meaning they are expected, they are ordered, they are obligated. If there's going to be a better relationship moving forward, or if there's going to be a healing of the present relationship. James says you must be, number one, speedy to listen. That means with the intent to understand and consider. Have you ever heard people say, yeah, I heard you, I hear you? But that's not what James means. He said, each one of you must be, all of us, speedy to listen with the intent to understand the heart of the other person and to consider it. Secondly, you must be, each one of us must be slow to speak. In other words, slow to tell what's on one's mind, slow to say what they're really thinking. Have you heard a person ever say, well, I just tell people what I'm thinking. I just always say what's on my mind. James says that's not too wise. He said in relationships that are fractured, if we're going to move beyond that, either in that fractured relationship or if we go into a new relationship, he says, learn to speak slower. It doesn't mean the cadence of the speech, but it means don't be so quick to say everything that you're thinking and everything that you're feeling. And then thirdly, slow to get angry, slow to become agitated in the soul. Don't let things agitate your soul to the point to where immediately there is the desire to be punitive. See, if that becomes the pattern, then healing relationships is less likely to take place. And then finally, to heal a relationship, a fractured relationship, it requires a heart to walk away from hurt. That it's within the heart of the individuals within the relationship. Look at what Jesus taught in Matthew chapter 6, verses 11 and 12. Give us today the food we need, and forgive us our sins as we have forgiven those who sin against us. Let's parse this just for a second. Give. Jesus says this is how we ought to talk to God. We should petition God. We request of God to grant to us, to bestow a gift that allows an advantage. We ask God to give us the life-sustaining need of food day by day. And he said that gives us an advantage. Okay, but then he moves to, and forgive us. God grant us the nutrients, but God also grant us forgiveness. Forgiveness by God allows food to digest better. Well, what does he mean, forgive? Send whatever we've done against you away from you. Don't let that boil inside of you, God. Don't spend much time dealing with what I didn't do, what I did do that was wrong. God, I'm asking of you to let it go. I'm asking of you to disregard it. But then James says to each of us, forgive others. When we forgive others, it allows food to digest even better. When we let other people go from how they fractured us, it allows us to rest even better, knowing that not only do we have the forgiveness of God in letting us go, but we have also done something that God has asked us to do, and that is to let other people go. Send away their shortcomings. Let it go. Disregard it. And that can be a challenge. Forgiving can't mean one thing for my needs and my sins and not the same for others. If we expect to heal relationships, when they fail, then we must be willing to listen to the master healer about how relationships are healed. Diagnose the source of the fracture. What's causing the quarrel? Secondly, be open to listening instead of speaking. And then third, there must be a heart inside the fractured heart to let it go. I look forward to seeing you again next week in Family Basics 101. Don't be late and don't skip class.